The studio lights flickered softly like dying stars. The air was heavy, dense with silence, the kind that falls right before something shatters. Cameras were rolling, but no one dared breathe too loudly. In the center of the set stood Song Kang, his eyes fixed somewhere beyond the lens, somewhere deep inside himself. His lips trembled. His chest rose and fell with the weight of something invisible. The script in his hands hung loosely, as if forgotten. "Action," the director whispered, and the world seemed to tighten around him. It wasn't supposed to be more than a scene, a simple, scripted heartbreak. Yet from the moment he opened his mouth, something was off. The way his voice cracked in the first line, hammer in his fingertips. It was no longer performance, it was confession. The moment his eyes filled, the entire crew froze. When the camera zoomed in, every detail magnified, the small twitch at the corner of his mouth, the veins tightening in his neck, the unsteady breath that sounded too real. The director hesitated, torn between admiration and concern. But he didn't call cut, not yet. In that fragile space between fiction and truth, Song Kang broke. A choked sob escaped his throat, raw, unfiltered, terrifyingly human. It wasn't in the script. His co-star, Yoo Jung, blinked in shock. Her cue was still 5 lines away. But her instincts told her something was wrong. The rest of the set blurred around him, the cameras, the lights, the quiet hum of machines. Song Kang wasn't acting anymore. He was remembering. Someone near the monitor whispered, "Is he okay?" No one answered. To understand that moment, you have to know the man behind the frame. Song Kang, the industry's quiet perfectionist, known for his sharp jawline, gentle smile, and relentless pursuit of emotional truth. To millions, he was the ideal son, the flawless actor, the face that never cracked under pressure. But to those who worked closest with him, there was always a shadow that followed, an almost unbearable fear of imperfection. He once told a friend, "Terrified of being fake, of not feeling enough." Those words, long forgotten, resurfaced that day on set. For weeks, he had been pushing himself beyond exhaustion. Night shoots bled into dawn, scripts rewrote themselves at 3 a.m. Sleep became a rumor. His manager recalled him practicing the same line 50 times, whispering it into the mirror until his reflection looked like a stranger. The pressure to deliver something real, to prove that he wasn't just another pretty face, consumed him. He carried that burden quietly, smiling through interviews, nodding through compliments. But cracks had started to form beneath the surface. He was too still. One staff member later said, like someone holding his breath for too long. That day's scene was the final straw, a confrontation between love and loss. Coincidentally, it mirrored something from his real life, a memory of saying goodbye to someone he once couldn't let go. The director had no idea he was treading on that wound. The 4th take, his voice had started to break. By the 5th, his hands were shaking. When the director asked for one more, Song Kang hesitated, then nodded. The camera rolled again. Halfway through, his control slipped. His words tangled. His expression twisted into something too pained to belong to the script. Then the tears came, sudden, violent, unstoppable. He fell to his knees mid-scene, gasping for air. His lines forgotten. No one moved. The director's hand hovered over the monitor switch. "Cut," someone whispered. But before the word could escape his lips, Yoo Jung stepped forward. Wasn't supposed to. According to the script, she should have entered 20 seconds later. But instinct overruled direction. Her heels clicked against the studio floor as she crossed into the frame. Song Kang was on the ground now, trembling, his face hidden behind his hands. "Hey," she murmured, breaking the invisible rule of the scene. "Look at me." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. She crouched beside him, placed her hand on his shoulder. He didn't react. The cameras kept rolling. Somewhere behind them, the assistant director muttered in confusion, "What is she doing?" But she ignored them all. Slowly, she wrapped her arms around him. It wasn't part of the story. It wasn't acting. It was something primal, the kind of human impulse that defies professionalism. For a long moment, he didn't respond. His body was rigid, breath shallow. Then, like a string snapping, he collapsed into her arms, sobbing. The sound of it, muffled, broken, filled the set with unbearable tension. The air felt electric. heavy with emotion no one could name. A camera operator quietly wiped his eyes. Still filming through the viewfinder, Kim Yoo Jung whispered something. Just loud enough for him to hear. No one else caught it. But whatever she said, it anchored him. His breathing slowed. His hands unclenched. Slowly, she guided him upright, her hands steady on his back. When the director finally called cut, no one moved. It was as if the moment refused to end. After the lights dimmed, the silence stayed. Song Kang stood there, his eyes still wet, his chest heaving. Yoo Jung's hands trembled slightly as she stepped away. For a heartbeat, they looked at each other, two actors of their roles, facing something far greater than performance. Later that night, someone from the crew would say, "It felt like we just witnessed something sacred. Not acting, but truth." And in a way, they were right. Because what had happened wasn't planned, wasn't written. It was a breaking point, and a beginning. No one knew what Kim Yoo Jung's gesture would set in motion. No one could have predicted the storm it would unleash, the rumors, the questions, the whispers that would ripple through the industry for weeks. At that exact moment, there was only silence, and the sound of two people breathing, alive and unguarded beneath a blinding light. The cameras had captured everything. Nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, the studio was unrecognizable. The laughter, the rhythm, casual chatter of staff that once filled the air, gone. Every corner hummed with unspoken tension. The only sound that remained was the faint whir of lighting rigs and the occasional shuffle of feet, as if everyone was moving carefully around a wound that hadn't yet healed. Song Kang didn't show up for the first call. His makeup chair sat empty, a cup of coffee cooling beside it, untouched. No one dared move it. Kim Yoo Jung arrived quietly, her face hidden beneath a mask and a cap. Her usual radiant energy dimmed. When she entered, heads turned, but no one spoke. The director sat in silence behind his monitor, replaying the footage from the previous night over and over again. The scene, if you could still call it that, was devastating. Song Kang's trembling voice, his collapse, Jung's arms around him, the rawness of it all. Every frame bled authenticity. It was the kind of footage that could make careers, or ruin them. When the assistant asked you if they should delete it, the director didn't answer. He just stared at the frozen image of Song Kang, head buried in his hands, and muttered, "You don't delete truth." No one saw Song Kang until late that evening. He had disappeared into one of the small rehearsal rooms on the second floor. The one without mirrors, the only place he could be invisible. Inside, he sat alone on the floor, scripts scattered around him. A crew member who found him later recalled, he was whispering his lines, over and over, like a prayer. Walls were bare, except for a single light that cast his shadow large and distorted against the wall. He wasn't rehearsing anymore. He was searching for what had cracked open inside him. For the reason he'd lost control. He would later describe that moment as a collapse of boundaries. "I couldn't tell if I was acting or remembering. It wasn't from the scene, it was from something I buried years ago." There were rumors, of course, talk of an old heartbreak, a he'd never spoken about. But those were just whispers, shadows of a truth only he knew. While Kim Yoo Jung sat in her van, staring out at the rain streaking across the windows. She'd watched him break, and she'd acted on instinct, something so human, so impulsive. It defied every professional line she'd ever known. She had touched him not as an actress, but as a person who couldn't bear to see someone fall apart alone. But the industry wasn't kind to instinct. By the following day, the whispers had spread. She broke character. One crew member said. She ruined the take, said another. The word unprofessional began circling like vultures. There were even rumors that she'd overstepped, that her gesture had embarrassed Song Kang publicly. Yoo Jung didn't defend herself. She stayed silent, refusing interviews, ignoring messages. Asked by a staff member if she regretted stepping in, answered softly, "If I hadn't, he would have shattered. I'd rather be blamed for that than stand still and watch." Still, the weight of judgment was brutal. Communities began speculating, twisting the story into something scandalous. Publicity stunt. Some said, fake tears. Others claimed it was a ploy to promote the drama. She stayed silent. The more they filled the silence with their own noise. For Song Kang, the storm hit differently. He was embarrassed, ashamed that his private pain had spilled into the public eye. For days, he avoided cameras, avoided people. But he couldn't avoid the truth of what had happened. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Yoo Jung's expression, steady, fearless, real. Something about that moment haunted him. Not as humiliation, but as awakening. A week later, the video leaked. It began as a 30-second clip on an anonymous fan forum, Song Kang sobbing uncontrollably. Yoo Jung holding him. Whispering something that couldn't be heard. Within hours, it spread everywhere. News outlets picked it up. Headlines screaming. Song Kang's emotional breakdown caught on camera. Yoo Jung's shocking on-set gesture, unscripted and unforgettable. The internet divided itself in two. The viewers called it the most genuine display of emotion they'd ever seen, acting beyond acting. Art meeting truth. Half tore it apart, fake. Manipulated, too convenient. Yoo Jung's agency issued a short statement. What occurred on set was an unscripted emotional moment between two actors. We ask for understanding and respect. Song Kang's agency said nothing. Silence, again. But silence can be louder than words. Days that followed. The set became a battlefield of perception. Reporters camped outside the studio gates. Producers debated whether to keep or cut the scene. Sponsors hesitated. Some whispered that it was a career-ending mistake, others said it was a masterpiece. The director, exhausted but unshaken. Both actors into a private meeting. The three of them sat together in an empty studio, surrounded by the ghosts of that moment. Looked at Song Kang first. Do you want me to remove the footage? Song Kang shook his head. His voice was quiet, but steady. Oh. Leave it. It's real. Then the director turned to Yoo Jung. And you? She hesitated, then nodded slowly. It's not perfect. But maybe it doesn't need to be. It was the decision that changed everything. When the episode aired 3 weeks later, the infamous scene remained intact, raw, unedited, unpolished. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Viewers wept. Critics called it a landmark in emotional realism. The chemistry between the two actors was hailed as too real to be fiction. And yet, beneath the praise, there lingered a quiet melancholy. Because those who had been there knew, it wasn't just acting. It was two human beings, momentarily stripped of every layer of artifice. After the broadcast, Song Kang gave his first interview. He looked pale but composed, carrying that same quiet depth the public had fallen in love with. When asked about the breakdown, he paused for a long time before answering. That moment wasn't planned. I was scared, terrified, actually. I've always feared losing control in front of others. Maybe that's what being human is. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do is break. When asked about Yoo Jung's unexpected reaction, a faint smile crossed his face. She didn't act. She responded. And in that moment, she reminded me that it's okay to fall apart. Yoo Jung's own statement came days later. In a short interview that seemed almost reluctant, she spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. People call it a mistake, but to me, it was a heartbeat. He wasn't a co-star then. Someone who needed to be seen. Acting is about connection. Sometimes the most powerful performance is when you forget you're performing. Her words spread like wildfire, the entire narrative. Suddenly, the public saw not scandal, but sincerity. Clips of the scene began trending under hashtags like raw truth, acting beyond acting, and when art feels real. But for Song Kang and Yoo Jung, it wasn't about the internet or the applause. About what they had found in that fragile collision between fear and empathy. Months later, at a press conference for the drama's finale, they appeared side by side. The cameras flashed. Microphones crowded the table, and the air buzzed with anticipation. But when they looked at each other, everything else faded. No grand gestures, no forced smiles, just mutual understanding. When asked if they would ever recreate that level of raw emotion again, Song Kang laughed softly. You can't recreate honesty. You can only live it once. Yoo Jung added quietly. What happened that day reminded me why I act, not to perform, but to feel. To be human. Even for a second. For a long moment, no one spoke. The room was heavy with something unspoken. Something deeper than words. In the months that followed, their scene would be studied in film schools, dissected in acting workshops, and replayed endlessly by fans who called it the most genuine moment in K-drama history. But for the two who lived it, it remained something sacred, untouched, unrepeatable. Years later, Song Kang would refer to that day as his rebirth as an actor. That breakdown wasn't my weakness, it was the moment I learned what truth feels like. Kim Yoo Jung would say simply. It wasn't the unthinkable. It was the only thing I could do. And so, what began as an accident became legend, a collision of fear, empathy, and courage that blurred the boundary between art and reality. 'Cause sometimes, the most unforgettable performances aren't scripted. They're live. And in that moment, under the blinding light of the camera, people didn't just act. They became truth.